I shouldn't have accepted that contract. It was supposed to be just a quick freelance job, driving the van and operating the backup camera for an independent nature documentary channel. The plan was to film a piece on invasive species in the swamps of southern Florida near Homestead, where people swear they've seen everything. Pythons escaped from breeders, alligators, and whispered rumors of something bigger, something that shouldn't exist there. I laughed when I heard anaconda. I rationalized someone got confused, internet hoaxes. But the laughter caught in my throat when I felt the stagnant water resound, not as if something were swimming, but as if a whole body were displacing the swamp. We arrived at dusk, when the heat drops but the humidity sticks to your bones. The crew was small. Me, the producer, Claire, a grumpy biologist named Mike, and the host, Trent, one of those who make jokes to mask fear. The local boatman, a quiet Cuban named Rojas, was waiting for us in a scratched airboat with an improvised headlamp on the mast. "You want to film something big? Tonight's a dark moon," he said without looking us in the eye. The water goes silent before it shows. I instinctively wrote the phrase down. I always write down what gives me chills. The airboat engine roared, and we cut through the channels like a razor, raising a smell of decaying organic matter that was almost sweet, sickening. The vegetation closed in above our heads in some stretches, vines hanging like curtains. Mosquitoes insisted on our wrists. The light faded quickly, and everything turned into silhouette and shadow. Claire asked us to stop at a point marked on the GPS. Rumors said a farmer had lost 2 goats there with no trace, no trail, as if they had been pulled down. The engine noise died, leaving a total silence broken only by subtle snaps, something distant breaking the surface for a second and disappearing. I adjusted the camera's gain, infrared light on, and focused on the water's surface. Trent spoke with that brave presenter tone, but I saw his hand tremble as he held the laser pointer to demonstrate the area. The red dot wavered over the mud, and a line of bubbles slowly rose, very slowly, like a breath measuring us. "Probably an alligator," Mike said. But the shadow that outlined itself under the moon's reflection didn't look like an alligator. It was too long in an offensive way. The water moved, not a splash, a weighty ripple. Something scraped the hull underneath, a short scrape that made the metal sing with a hollow, low sound, as if it were a strangled voice trying to get out. Rojas held his breath along with us. "That's a loose log," he whispered. But the lie hit the edge of the boat and fell into the water like a heavy object. We pointed the lights. The lens searched for contours and found dark green skin speckled with mud, thick like wet tire rubber. I saw for the first time the damp shine of scales the size of large coins. And then, an eye. Not like an alligator's with a vertical pupil. It was a dark sphere, without reflection, sunk into a deep orbit, moving slowly, evaluating, and it didn't blink. A part of the body rose from the darkness, just a segment, but it looked like the arm of a giant lying down, with muscles that shouldn't exist in a creature of that kind. The raised part dripped water, a viscous thread that hit my wrist, cold as ice. I almost dropped the camera. "It's an anaconda," Mike said, but the way one speaks the name of their own nightmare. "Impossible. Here." Claire touched my shoulder without looking at me. "Film." And I filmed. I trembled and filmed. I followed the curve of the body, which seemed endless, sliding around, drawing a circle just a few meters from us. The water, too still, started to spin. The headlamp caught the muscles' bulges, a whitish scar crossing scales, maybe from a propeller, maybe from teeth. It circled our boat slowly, like someone measuring a box before opening it. Trent tried to make a joke. "Well, at least it's not a flying snake." No one laughed. The laser quivered so much that the dot ran across the animal's skin like an insect. That's when I noticed the sound of the insects had stopped. Nothing buzzed, nothing croaked. Just the breath of 4 people and the engine off. The swamp seemed to be listening. The first impact came from the side, low, a hit that lifted a blade of water and made the airboat tilt. I pressed my knee against the seat, the camera to my chest. Rojas cursed and tried to turn on the engine. The second impact wasn't a hit. It was a pressure. A force from underneath lifting the stern, spinning our axis, as if the bottom had turned to rubber. The bow pointed toward the trees, and the headlamp illuminated exposed roots, full of mud, like old fingers ready to grab us. "Don't move," Rojas shouted. "If you speed up, it'll coil." It. The word stuck in my head. It. As if the whole swamp were a female following a single law: squeeze until it breaks. The camera, still on, caught the moment when the body rose and revealed the whole shape of a turn. It wasn't just length, it was width, it was density. A living cylinder that, for a second, touched the hull and creaked, and the metal cried. The headlamp caught the head emerging like a soaked log, and then the mouth opened, silently, revealing a deep, pale pink and a row of curved teeth like sewing needles, small and enough. The tongue, black, touched the air, sensing our shape before accepting us. Mike lost his composure. He tried to stand, the boat rocked, he fell to his knees. Claire, pale, told me not to stop. "Don't stop, don't stop." I didn't stop. I pressed the camera's eye as if it would protect me, as if filming would turn what was happening into a movie, something that could be paused. But you can't pause the swamp. The engine's vibration finally kicked in. Rojas pulled the throttle, and the fan screamed. The sound shattered the silence like a grenade. The snake dove, but didn't flee. The circle accelerated, and the water, now turbulent, seemed to boil underneath. We moved half a meter. A drag held the stern. I felt physically the idea of being in someone's hand, a grip on my ankle. I looked and saw nothing, just the cold certainty that something had brushed my skin beneath the seat. I lifted my feet. "Let go!" Rojas yelled, striking the water with an oar as if that made sense. The wood dropped, and when it rose, it came with a snap that split the oar in half. The broken half flew, hit my shoulder, and I saw stars. I fell sitting, the camera still firm, filming the sky, filming the beam of the headlamp shaking, filming choking breaths. Trent did something that only desperate people do. He pointed the laser directly into its eye. For a moment, the red dot settled in that damp darkness and stayed firm. The eye didn't blink. It slid toward us, unhurried. I swear I felt the temperature drop. The head came slow from the side, showing scars, slime stuck to the scales, and stopped 15 centimeters from the hull. The hull, vibrating with the engine, seemed to accept. The metal seemed to give, as if asking to be embraced. And then, without warning, the water exploded into foam. Something released the stern. The airboat lunged forward, almost throwing us into the mud. Rojas, with reflexes of someone who's seen lost souls, made a sharp turn, and we escaped to a wider channel. The headlamp swept the dark and caught a sight I don't want to remember, but that I wake up remembering every night. The snake raised halfway out of the water, like a walking pillar, following our trail, and in the middle of the body, an irregular, recent bulge, like a protrusion that didn't belong to the anatomy. The shape of something trapped inside, still trying to be something else. Filmed? Everything filmed. The counter was running, the audio bars rising and falling with the engine and our screams. I felt the weight of the card in the camera as if it were lead, and a silly, urgent thought took over. If I fall, I'll swallow this card. The proof stays with me. When the water finally calmed and the distance grew, no one spoke for a few good minutes, only the engine and the wind. Then Claire broke the silence. We filmed that, right? I looked at the monitor. There were shapes there that the human eye refuses to accept. The swamp, for some reason, makes things bigger when viewed through a lens. Rojas slowed down. We're heading back now. We're not from here to learn the lesson twice. Mike scratched his forehead, leaving his hand there, hiding his eyes. Trent breathed heavily, trying to turn the story into courage. "Tomorrow we come back in the daylight," he said. I wanted to laugh. The daylight has nothing to do with what lives in the water. I didn't know, but the worst part hadn't even started. The swamp remembers, and what lives in it also remembers. Because when we returned to the gravel road, already dawn, the van's headlights caught marks in the mud that weren't from tires. They were parallel and deep in an S shape, as if a heavy body, very heavy, had crossed from the canal to the shore. And the air, that stagnant air of Florida City, brought a faint smell of rotten fish that seemed like a whisper inside the nostrils. It wasn't a hallucination. It was a warning. I dreamed of the eye that night, and in the dream, the red dot of the laser was still on, and the eye reflected the dot from inside, as if it had swallowed it. I woke up with the feeling that someone was pressing under the bed, pushing the slats upward, testing the weight, and the phone vibrating. Messages from Rojas, sent at 3:18 a.m. Just 2 words. She left. I might have slept for 40 minutes, a shallow sleep, interrupted by jolts of my body as if I were falling. I woke up to the hum of the motel air conditioning and the image of the eye still stuck behind my eyelids. When I sat up on the bed, the sheet clung to my sweaty skin, and the smell of mildew seemed stronger, as if the room had been breathing with me all night. Rojas's message was still flashing on the screen. She left. Those 2 words carried weight. They seemed to have displaced the air. In the parking lot, the early morning was almost blue. Claire was leaning against the van, arms crossed, wearing the same clothes from the night before and a burnt-out cigarette between her fingers. She doesn't smoke. I know she doesn't smoke. It was just something to hold, nothing more. Mike sat on the curb, staring into space. Trent, the host, was trying to come up with an opening for the episode on his phone, reading and re-recording, getting the tone wrong each time. No variation of voice could capture what we had seen. I tested the camera. The card was there. The footage, intact. When I hit play, the swamp appeared on the monitor like a wound. The audio brought back our whispers, our breaths, the engine. And that moment, that massive shape drawing a circle around the boat. I watched without blinking. At certain seconds, the lens caught something I hadn't noticed live. Small vibrations on the water's surface, as if the surface itself were trembling with fear. "We're not publishing this raw," Claire said. "Without context, they'll say it's fake." Mike raised his head, eyes red. "What if it's better to say it's fake?" Rojas appeared from the side of the 24-hour diner, a little coffee cup that looked like a thimble in his hand. He glanced at the screen for a second and looked away. "I told you today's a dark moon." "You said that yesterday," Trent replied, irritated with nerves. "Today's a different night." Rojas didn't blink. "She doesn't have a calendar. We left before sunrise to come back during the day, as Trent had promised in an act that suddenly seemed childish and presumptuous. I would say we were prepared, but that would be a lie. The van cut through the flat roads, the horizon a liquid line, palm trees like sticks against a sky that brightened without hurry. In a stretch of gravel, Claire asked us to stop. I got out with the camera. There, just a few meters from the shoulder, were the marks we had seen the night before. 2 deep parallel S-shaped grooves pressed into the mud, crossing from the ditch toward a low patch of grass. I crouched down. The edge of the groove had small grains of sand stuck to something viscous, transparent, a subtle mucus that shimmered in the first sunray. A faint smell of rancid fish rose, different from the swamp, cleaner, more concentrated. "She left the water," said Rojas. "For what?" Mike asked, maybe to anyone who would answer. Rojas scratched his neck. "To remember." We filmed. The zoom caught small flies landing and taking off, indecisive, as if the ground were repelling them. Trent walked beside the marks for a few meters, trying hard to seem curious and not scared. The trail disappeared into a stretch of trampled grass, and there we found something. A deer's footprint split in half, the phalange separated from the hoof capsule, as if something had bitten the soft part and spit out the rest out of disinterest. Mike paled. "This isn't alligator behavior," Rojas murmured in agreement. "She doesn't bite, she squeezes, and what's left isn't much." We returned to the airboat at sunrise. The swamp by day is another creature. Sounds everywhere, birds cutting through the air, water sparkling as if it were innocent. The smell of organic matter dilutes in phantom sea breeze. I almost found myself believing we had exaggerated the night before. Almost. The hull of the boat, however, had a new mark, a strip of metal slightly dented on the side, as if someone had pressed it with a giant fist. I ran my hand over it and felt the groove under the chipped paint. The boat had been touched by something that knew the exact dosage of force. We headed to the same GPS point. Along the way, Mike tried to convince the team to collect water samples to search for DNA. If it's really a Eunectes, he said, the environment tells the story. No one disagreed. Claire just asked us not to keep the boat in one place for too long. Movement is survival, she said. I wrote the phrase down. Daylight gives false courage. We stopped. Rojas kept the engine on the lowest setting just to keep us from staying still. I turned on the main camera and left the backup recording in wide shot. The microphone picked up the sound of birds, distant croaks, the rustling of leaves. Then, for a full minute, everything seemed to be sucked away. The sound, the breeze, the heat. A silence cut the world, not absolute but contained, as if someone had put padding on the walls of reality. The monitor clock showed exactly 60 seconds without a croak. Mike stopped mid-sentence. Trent lowered his voice without noticing. I felt the hair on my arm stand up. She doesn't like the sun, but she needs it, Rojas said softly. She goes to the edges, where the shine doesn't hurt, only warms. We turned the boat into a cove shaded by cypress trees. The water there was a darker, purer green. I adjusted the polarizer and saw details under the surface that were previously reflections. Roots like ribs, dead leaves floating like detached skin, a plastic bag spinning. And then, in the distance, a shape that didn't seem like anything until it started to move. At first I thought it was a submerged tree trunk sweeping the bed according to the current. Then I realized the rhythm, not the waters, but a body breathing with the water. The shape traced an arc, kicking up liquid dust from the bottom, and came toward us as if it weren't an animal, but land moving. "Don't get any closer," Claire said. Rojas was already pulling back when something passed between the hull and the light, a wide shadow that darkened the reflected sun for a second. The boat tilted slightly as when a whale passes beneath a speedboat. I saw it again, this time not in a strike, but in its size that didn't fit the lens. The skin, seen in the sun, had shades that the night steals, greens pulling toward bronze, irregularly perfect patches, a texture almost like wet tree bark, and on the flank, the pale scar. It was the same one. She recognized us. The word came without permission. Recognized. Mike lowered the collection bucket to scoop water and some bottom sediment. A water arm rose and slapped the bucket out of his hands, throwing the instrument about 3 meters away. The bucket floated for a second and disappeared, as if it had been pulled down by a hand. Mike recoiled, his eyes lost, and tripped over the seat. I framed the shot, automatic. The focus caught a detail that would stay with me the rest of the day. Small triangular cuts around the main scar, like bite marks from something that regretted and fled. The swamp has attempts and abandonments. "We can't do this, let's go," Claire said firmly, and it was the first sensible decision of the morning. Rojas engaged the reverse and pulled away, but a gentle and firm ripple followed us from below. The engine roared louder, and the shadow stayed parallel, like an invisible train running alongside. The birds resumed their songs, but the music stayed behind, stuck in place. I had the sensation that if I turned my head, I would see our own trail being erased. It was then that we got the call. The cell signal there is capricious. It appears and disappears like a wary animal. The ring echoed faintly from Claire's pocket. She answered on speakerphone without thinking. The screen showed unknown number. A distorted male voice with static like an old radio said, "You have the footage." It wasn't a question. "Who is this?" Claire asked coldly. The voice continued, "Go back to Highway 997. There's an abandoned station after kilometer 12. Leave the card. Pick up another." Mike shook his head. Trent suddenly found courage. "Who do you think you are? This is journalism." The voice, impassive. "This isn't journalism, it's survival." The call dropped. I looked at Rojas. He didn't seem surprised. "Some people live off making sure certain things don't exist," he said. "And some things live off making sure people don't exist." Claire stared at me. "The decision is yours. You're the one who filmed." The weight of the card filled my pocket like stone. I thought about the eye that didn't blink. I thought about the lump in its body, the shape of something still trying to be what it once was. I thought about the sound of the hull creaking. I didn't want anyone editing our memory. "I'm not leaving anything," I said, with a courage I didn't recognize. "If they want it, they can come take it." Rojas smiled, or contracted his face in a way that made him look older. "Then it's better to leave the water now." That's what we did. The airboat cut the channel with controlled urgency, without any heroic camera entrances. I put away the lenses, locked the cases, strapped the backup card to my waist with tape, and left the main one inside my boot, under the insole, scraping my skin with every vibration of the boat. 15 minutes passed that felt like hours, the sun rising and peeling the mist away until the cement pier's edge appeared like civilization. We climbed up, and only then did I realize I was dizzy, not from motion but from accumulated silence. The sound of the road hit like salt on the tongue. The dirt parking lot had new marks, not the S-shaped grooves from that early morning, but a wide semicircular stripe, as if a very heavy body had spun on itself before returning to the water. There were boot prints on top, ours and others. Smooth soles, calculated steps, coming and going from the direction of the station the voice had mentioned. Claire gathered everyone by the van. Plan. We go back to the city. We save everything in the cloud, on a flash drive, in a safe, whatever we have. Then we decide. Rojas shook his head slowly. You still don't get it. She didn't stay in the swamp. I frowned. You said she left. I said she left. I didn't say where. It was then that the air changed again. The wind stopped, as if a hand covered the world. The rustling of the leaves was replaced by a low sound, almost sub-frequency, a weight on the middle ear. I recognized it. It was the same sound as the hull creaking, but coming from beneath the pier's wood. We walked slowly without coordinating toward the edge. The water seemed normal, small ripples from the wind, until they stopped, as if the surface had been passed over with a palm. The head emerged with an abominable decency. First the top, with mud crusts drying in plates, then the black eye. It came level with the wood where I was, less than an arm's length away. I crouched down without noticing, as if I were before a window. The eye framed me entirely. This time I saw something new, a thin film, not the nictitating membrane of reptiles, something else, like a veil. Behind it, a reflected shape that wasn't our group, but a solitary red dot. The laser. She carried a fragment of the night in her own gaze. I recoiled finally, with an involuntary heel snap against the wood. The head slid back unhurried, and that's when we all saw what I had only sensed the night before amid the chaos. In the middle of the body, beneath the firm skin, there was movement. Not the movement of something digesting, the movement of something that still needed air. An outline of a hand pushing from inside, opening a volume, and disappearing. The skin didn't yield. The hand didn't come back. Rojas removed his hat. "We're leaving now," he said, not asking. Claire agreed without the slightest resistance. Mike trembled, science slipping through his fingers like water. Trent, white as a sheet, finally understood he wasn't going to narrate this to anyone without carrying a curse. We left. We got into the van. I shut the door twice, as if an extra lock could hold what the swamp had borrowed from the world. As the road widened, a misaligned feeling settled in my chest. The sense that we weren't just fleeing an animal, but a territory. Something that, for some reason, had chosen to notice us. And when something like that notices, it doesn't unlearn. In the rearview mirror for a moment, I saw a line of water cutting parallel to the shore of the canal, winding and patient, following the movement of our van as if cars and boats were to it the same kind of prey. Things that make noise before stopping. I blinked and the line disappeared, or blended with the shadows. Modern life is good at this, confusing danger with landscape. At the gas station after kilometer 12, just as the voice had ordered, there was a silence that didn't match the rusted pumps and the faded soda billboard. I stopped the van for a few seconds, just to look. There were recent tire marks, a burnt-out cigarette on the ground, and a smell of chlorine. Not the kind that cleans, but the kind that masks. "If anyone shows up, we don't stop," Claire said. I just nodded. That's when the phone vibrated again. Once again, unknown number. I answered. The same voice, now with less static, spoke. "You're not filming anymore." I looked at the off-camera on the seat. "No." The voice, calm as still water. "Then pay attention. She doesn't stay where you film. She goes where you see." The call dropped. I kept staring at the black screen, seeing myself reflected. My hand was trembling. The road stretched ahead, straight, too straight, like an invitation or a target. Highway 997 seemed like a ribbon stretched between two worlds. On the right, the swamp breathed behind the trees, humidity rising like vapor from a fevered body. On the left, empty fields and warehouses with faded signs, all with the same hollow promise of ice, bait, soda. Every kilometer, my body expected a sound, a rustle in the bushes, the snap of something heavy breaking the ditch. The sound didn't come. Instead, a silence weighed down on the roof of the van, and the engine sounded small, inconvenient, like a fly buzzing. Claire held the printed map that no one uses anymore, as if paper could delay fear. Mike squeezed an empty sample tube until the plastic bent. Trent, silent, chewed ice from a foam cup, as if trying to convince his teeth they still had control over his body. I drove, feeling the card under the insole scratch my skin with every vibration, reminding me that if I lost my head, at least the proof would pull me back to reality. The cell signal returned in a flash. Delayed notifications popped up, trivial tragedies from a world that didn't know it had changed. I know it's foolish, but I wrote a message to my sister. "I'll arrive tomorrow." I deleted it before sending. The verb arrive seemed too bold. We passed the abandoned gas station the voice had mentioned. In the midday sun, it looked like everything that decays slowly, a sad beauty. The awning creaked in a wind I didn't feel. An overturned ice cream cart, a freezer with a dented door. On the ground, shards of glass. I saw tire tracks entering and exiting paths that weren't roads, as if cars had avoided stopping but had needed to get close. The chlorine smell was still there, but weaker, like an undecided perfume covering an insistent odor of mud and old fish. I accelerated. "City," Claire said, like someone giving a direction to a drifting ship. "Safe, upload, lawyers." So logical it hurt to hear. Rojas, who had been following us in his car, blinked the headlights once, an unspoken agreement. Then, at the next intersection, he didn't turn. He signaled for the service road along the canal. He disappeared behind the trees like a character in a story who knows a secret path. My impulse was to follow him. Claire held my wrist on the wheel, gently but firmly. "He's from here." "We aren't." I exhaled the breath I didn't know I was holding. I kept on course. We reached Florida City around 11. The city seemed normal, which made it feel foreign. Children on bicycles, a lazy line at the diner, a supply truck delivering water. I parked the van behind the motel, where the security cameras pointed at the doors. We entered the room carrying cases like they were urns. Claire established a small ritual. We locked the door, closed the curtains, took out the cards, spread them on the table, photographed each one, labeled them. Only then did we turn on the laptops. I took the insole out of my boot. The card was damp with sweat and had a layer of dust from the road. I cleaned it with compressed air, my hands trembling. When it clicked into the reader and the folder opened, the room breathed again. We uploaded to 3 different clouds, created duplicate folders on 2 hard drives, and encrypted them. The progress bar moved up in percentages that seemed malicious. At certain points, the bar froze at a number, and it felt like if I blinked, it would regress. "Don't spread this without preparation," Mike said, and there was a plea in his science. "If we release it now, it'll turn into memes, theories, and someone will come up with a cheap debunk. We need biologists' measurements, environmental data, water DNA." He looked at his crumpled tube and almost laughed. "And a new bucket, I guess." Trent paced back and forth, memorizing opening lines that didn't sound stupid. He couldn't do it. Finally, he rested his forehead on the wall and stood there, as if looking for a cold spot. I sat in the chair, making sure the files followed each other without interruption. Each clip that completed was one less muscle contracted in my back. At one point, the air conditioning made a choking noise. The silence that followed felt like the one under the pier. We looked at each other. The ceiling light flickered, came back, flickered again. The building breathed, the upload paused. I swear I heard water dripping, but there were no open taps, no showers, no anything. It was droplets, in an oddly rhythmic pattern, coming from somewhere above us. Plop, 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 like someone squeezing a huge sponge. Claire opened the hallway door and peeked out. The carpet was dry. The sound was coming from the ceiling, from the air duct. Mike climbed onto a chair, removed the grate with the tip of a key. The smell came first, watery body, moss, cold. Not the smell of old mildew, the smell of living matter that shouldn't be there. "Close it," I whispered, not recognizing my own voice. Mike obeyed. We closed the door. The upload started moving again, as if the internet had understood it could be afraid too. When the last file finished, Claire stubbed out the still unlit cigarette she hadn't even smoked. "Done. We have redundancy. Now food. Then we decide." I wanted to say shower, but the word felt like an invitation. We went to the diner on the corner, a place with the usual feel, open windows, hamburgers sizzling on a griddle that will keep sizzling while the world lasts. We sat at a corner table. The silverware had that faint melancholy of scratched stainless steel, and that's when I saw the first impossible thing far from the swamp. On the bulletin board, full of fishing flyers and bar bands, there was a new sheet of paper pinned with 2 staples. Bright white, no logo, no contact. Just one sentence printed in a regular font. "She doesn't stay where you film, she goes where you see." My stomach turned into a closed muscle. I looked around. No one was paying attention to the message. I pulled the paper hard. A thread of glue stuck to the wood. On the back, nothing. I turned to Claire. She read it, showed no reaction. She folded the paper and put it in her bag with the ease of someone putting away a bill. "It could be a coincidence. It could be someone playing around," Trent ventured quietly. Mike, pale. "Or it could be an instruction." "From who?" I asked, more to get the question out than because I wanted the answer. "From someone who's seen it," Mike said. We returned to the motel with the afternoon light turning yellow, a color I've always associated with sleep, and that, on this day, meant waiting. In the second-floor hallway, the carpet had marks from a cleaning cart's wheels, and over it, a wet shine in a narrow trail that led to our door. We stopped 2 meters away. No one spoke. Claire held the doorknob and stepped back. "Whoever's outside, let me know if anyone comes up." Trent went to the stairs, Mike to the other end. I stayed in the middle and filmed, not out of courage, but out of reflex. We opened it. The room seemed intact, but the air had a damp density, as if someone had been showering with the bathroom door open for hours. The carpet was cold under our soles. A low sound came from the bathroom, something between a sigh and a submerged engine. Claire moved forward slowly, cell phone in hand instead of a knife, as if videos recorded monsters in the closet. She pushed the door. The light inside flickered. The mirror had a veil of condensation, and in the center, where a hand would pass to see itself, there was a drier circle. Around the drain, a thin, greenish foam, breaking apart into threads, and at the bottom of the tub, something I only recognized because I'd seen variants of it all my life. Scales. 2. Large, elliptical, smooth, held together by a film of water that refused to run off. I couldn't go in. I filmed from the doorframe. The zoom brought the detail. On the edges of the scales there were small straight marks like parallel scratches. I thought of the lump in her body, the hand pushing from within. I thought of the triangular cuts near the scar. I wondered if they weren't scratches, but letters. The world has alphabets we never wanted to learn. "She went up where?" Trent whispered from the door, as if speaking loud could complete a ritual. Mike pointed to the vent grill above the shower. "Is there enough space?" "For what's soft, there's always room," he replied, and the phrase hit me with delay. I felt my back against the wall, my body searching for a limit. Claire decided quickly, as if it were a premonition. "We're leaving. Now. No theatrics." We gathered the bare minimum. Cards, hard drives, laptops, the rest stayed behind. In the hallway, a cleaning cart blocked half the passage. A trail of water led from the cart to the elevator. a transparent trace that wouldn't dry. I pressed the button. The door opened with a sound of wet rubber. We entered. The door closed. The mirror inside the elevator showed our pale versions, wide-eyed. The needle moved from 2 to 1 with the slowness of a boat in sand. On the ground floor, the receptionist, a woman with an anchor tattoo on her wrist, looked up and gave an automatic smile. The smile faded when she saw our equipment. Early checkout? Claire nodded. Change of plans. The anchor on her wrist moved with the tendons, and for a second the drawing seemed to sink. I paid, signed, and in the comments field, I wrote without thinking, "Smell of water." The receptionist read it, slowly raised her eyes and said, "It rains inside sometimes." The phrase followed me to the parking lot. The heat outside hit like an awkward hug. The van was where we had left it, but the hood had opaque spots of dust I didn't remember. I ran my hand over it, and a grain of sand stuck to something that made a thread between the metal and my finger before breaking. A light viscosity. The swamp had learned to sign its presence. We got in, started the engine. As I shifted into reverse, I saw Rojas's car pull up to the curb across the street. He got out, walked without haste as if not wanting to scare us. He knocked on the window. Claire opened it just a crack. His face looked drier, as if the sun had ironed it. "You can't go to the big city," he said. "She doesn't disappear in the noise, she likes the noise." Trent tried to laugh, but the sound didn't come. "Where then?" Rojas looked beyond our heads, at a spot that didn't exist there. "Where the water doesn't find an easy way." "Mountains?" Mike suggested weakly. Rojas shook his head. "High concrete, old hospital, multi-level parking, abandoned building, things that are dried out by stubbornness, and fast." "Why?" I asked, like a tired child. "Because you became light to her, and light when it hits the right water shows the bottom." He pointed to my feet. "Take it out of your boot. If you run, you have to run light." I took it out. I put the card in my inner pocket, near my chest. My heart beat hard enough for a moment that I thought the card would enter through a rib. Rojas patted my shoulder gently and stepped back. "If she sees you stopped, she'll rise." Before returning to his car, he turned. "If you hear water where there isn't any, it's over. Don't run, stay still. Water likes a limp body." We left. The road opened in front of us like a hospital hallway. For some reason, the word hospital stayed stuck between my teeth. A multi-level parking building came to mind, dry concrete, ramps, little greenery. I didn't want to enter places that echo, but all places echo once the ear learns to listen. As I drove, the light changed in one of those transitions that aren't meteorology, they are the world's mood. The sun turned pale, the sky took on a milky layer. The shadows had no edges. The radio picked up a station I didn't choose, static, and under it, an old song, a broken bolero. The voice sang Aguas de Marzo and laughed a little before disintegrating into noise. I switched the frequency. Nothing. I turned it off. The buildings of Homestead appeared, low, spaced out, that type of urbanity that always seems temporary. In the distance, I saw a concrete skeleton, an unfinished mall, halted construction, exposed ramps and pillars, surrounded by fallen fencing. It looked dry by stubbornness. "There," I said. No one offered an alternative. We entered through a gap in the wire fence that didn't need a gap. We climbed a dusty ramp full of stones, each tire crack sounding like something breaking. On the second floor, I stopped near the edge, where the wind ran and the sun beat without generosity. The concrete exhaled a mineral heat, aggressive. There was no easy shadow. Perfect, if what was following us liked edges. There were only sharp edges there. We got out of the van and for a few seconds did what people do when they don't know how to live. We walked without purpose, looked at the ground, tested echoes. That's when we heard water where there wasn't any. It wasn't dripping. It wasn't pipes. It was a wide sliding, the brush of wet weight on rough surface coming from the ramp below. The sound climbed the floors like a tongue. My mouth went dry, in an almost offensive way. "Stay still," I told myself, remembering Rojas. But the body is water, and water remembers. The shadow appeared at the curve of the ramp before the body. The air got colder with the sound, the temperature dropping a couple of degrees in a sigh. A new smell, not from the swamp but from whetstone, arrived first. The first segment of the body touched the sun and gleamed with a varnish that shouldn't exist outside rivers. The skin, which at night was almost black and in the morning was bronze, there took the grey of the concrete and reflected it as wet steel. The eye, when it emerged, didn't search, it found. And for the first time, it blinked, not like a reptile, like something simulating the courtesy of mammals. I raised the camera without remembering having grabbed it. The hand held firm, the other found the focus. The image on the monitor looked calmer than reality. The microphone's sound recorded a continuous bass, a frequency that made the camera's body vibrate. The animal, the presence, the thing, dragged itself another meter, testing friction, and the noise was like a thick rope being pulled on concrete. The body lifted slightly in the middle, forming an arc, and under the arc dust flew, forming a low cloud that scratched the light. Inside the arc, for a moment, I saw again the volume that didn't belong to anatomy, and from within the volume, something pushed. This time it wasn't a hand. It was two symmetrical pushes, like knees wanting to bend. The skin yielded a millimeter and recoiled, elastic, cruel. The body responded with a tone I only knew from machines. It wasn't hunger. It was possession. "Don't run," Claire said, her voice 2 tones lower than usual. Mike grabbed my arm, not to hold me back, but to have something to hold. Trent, who had spent his life narrating dangers with a comfortable distance, whispered a wordless prayer. The head turned sideways and touched the ground with its chin, as if listening to the concrete. The eye aligned with the lens. I made a childish mistake. I zoomed in. The world became an eye. Inside it, behind that veil I had seen at the pier, a small air bubble spun, a round universe that rose slowly and didn't burst. I thought about how bubbles burst. I thought that maybe this was what remained of the breath from what was inside. The shadow gained full shape, and the ramp, for the first time since it was built, had to accept a weight it hadn't expected. The structure groaned low. The sound ran through the pillars and came back multiplied, a concrete choir, and then the animal stopped. It stopped and sniffed the wind with its tongue, a black ribbon drawing an S in the air. The tip touched my wrist, 8 meters away, not physically, but in a way that left me with water in my hands. I wanted to speak to it. Not in words, but with a thought I can't repeat without embarrassment. "We're not food." The head tilted a degree, as if a word had tickled an ear that didn't exist. Claire took a step forward, and with her open hand showed nothing. A human, ancestral, useless gesture. The phone vibrated in my pocket. I don't know why I answered. The same voice, now clear, so clear it felt like it was inside my throat, said, "Stop looking." I froze. How? The voice, "Water learns by reflex. Mirrors, lenses, monitors. Don't give eyes. She stays where she's seen." I looked at the camera monitor. The perfect image of the eye stared at me. I turned the screen down. The body before us trembled, a movement that wasn't retreat or advance, but irritation. "Turn it off," Claire said. I turned it off. The technological silence was like taking metal from my tongue. The animal bent its body slightly, adjusting as if a tension had been cut. Then something unexpected happened. The eye diverted. For the first time, it didn't look at us. It looked at the ground, at the invisible puddles the sun draws, as if it had lost focus. The voice on the phone continued, "You've attracted enough attention, now go down the other side, slowly, don't run." The call dropped. A second later, the air changed again, and the continuous bass got louder, as if the body before us had decided what to do. It decided. The snake lunged at a speed the concrete didn't accept right away. There was a jump of friction, sparks of dust, a wave of cold air. It didn't come in a straight line. It drew an arc to surround us, which in that open space was almost impossible, and it succeeded, not through the body, but through the shadow. The sun, at that second, placed us inside a hollow ring. The feeling of being surrounded was so absolute that my body thought it was wet. I don't know how I didn't collapse. The opposite edge of the ramp cracked. Down below, the shimmer of non-existent water flickered. Claire raised her voice, clear. To the backside, now. The backside was a staircase with no railing, steps carved in the unfinished structure. We went. Each step made dust slip like dry sand, and the word avalanche replaced tightness in my mind. The sound of the body behind us, scraping concrete, was faster than our legs. The bass in the air made my eyes water. At the first landing, I looked back. I shouldn't have. I saw the head emerging at floor level, the eye leveling with my chest, the mouth opening not to bite but to breathe, as if the air here was denser and required volume. The tongue touched the unfinished railing and left a black thread that shimmered for a second and disappeared. Claire pulled my shoulder. "Don't look." I stopped looking. We went down. The ground floor of the shopping skeleton was colder, wide shadow, smell of cement. For a second I thought we were safe. The creature above, the smooth floor, the wind outside. Then I heard from the dark the sound of water running beneath the earth. Every building has veins, every city has buried rivers, and water, when it smells light, rises. The sound of the underground water hit me like a diagnosis. Until then, I had tried to believe that concrete was shelter, that the dryness of the air would break any connection with the swamp. But old buildings have memories, and memories retain moisture. The ground floor of the skeleton had the smell of a basement with no history, cold dust, rust, a sourness that reminded me of wet metal left in the open. The wind passed over the ramps like an indecisive breath, and beneath it a liquid murmur flowed, not strong but present, as if someone were talking to the foundation of the place. Claire signaled to the right, where an incomplete concrete wall revealed a service corridor that ended in a square of light. "Side exit," she said. Mike squeezed the empty sample tube until it cracked. Trent looked back rhythmically, as if counting his own fear. I kept the camera hanging turned off, the strap cutting into my shoulder like a belt that saved and now punished. We took the first steps down that corridor, and the ground responded with fine grit beneath our soles like forgotten beach sand. The sound of water below accompanied, the same cadence, the same insistence. Every 3 steps, a brief pause, as if the current splashed against the invisible concrete and returned. This pause began to turn into a metronome for my breathing. At the end of the corridor, to the left, a narrow staircase descended to something unfinished. The light didn't reach there, but a stream of cold air rose with the smell of wet earth. To the right, the side exit, a rectangle of sad brightness, dust dancing. We went for the brightness. It was automatic. Life always trains us to look for doors with sky around them. 2 meters from the street, the ground trembled. Not an earthquake tremor, a pulse, like when a truck passes too close and the air wraps itself around things. The pulse came from outside. We stopped like one single body. The rectangle of light darkened slightly, as if a shadow had stopped at the door. Another shadow, smaller, slid behind the first. I didn't want to admit it, but I already knew what it meant. It had circled outside, up the ramp, and now it was blocking our exit with the precision of someone who understands architecture without ever studying it. "Go back," Claire said, her voice low, without false urgency. We went back. And the corridor, which seemed like a simple line, changed in size. The walls closed in by 0.5 centimeter, the ceiling dropped a finger. This is the impression fear gives when the exit closes. At the end of the corridor, the ground floor opened into a hall with thick pillars and stacks of wooden planks. The light coming through the cracks formed rectangles on the floor, rectangles that seemed like fallen doors. The sound of water beneath intensified. And that's when I realized it wasn't just water. There was drag. There was a sound of thick fabric passing over rough stone. The upper ramp returned a late echo, and I knew she was 2 levels above, crossing, finding our position as if aligning a compass. "Don't look," I repeated inwardly. "Don't give eyes." I turned the camera to the wall, like turning off a headlight. The urge to film was an itch in my brain, a sick comparison to courage. I didn't film. I decided that if I survived, the proof would be the scar the boat's hull carried, the mucus on the diner paper, the scales in the drain. and the marks that were about to appear here. Mike pointed to the corner where the slab had a round hole with iron bars, a kind of utility point with no utility. Cold wind came from there, the water's conversation rose from there. Around the hole, dark half-moon-shaped stains indicated old moisture, and newer than old, a recent shining trail, a viscous signature that the sun hadn't had a chance to dry. The trail formed a perfect S from one pillar to the other. The S, repeated 1,000 times since the previous night, had become a language in my head. "She's mapping," Mike whispered, "like reading a room with your fingers." Trent, who was trying to breathe without making a sound, said only, "Why?" No one answered because the answer might be too simple to fit. Because it can. Because something big, with intention, crosses the world just for the pleasure of crossing. The phone vibrated in my pocket. I wanted to ignore it. I couldn't. I answered without looking at the screen, hot blood in my ear. The voice, clean as a blade, said, "Stop. Breathe less." I held my breath. She confuses internal noise with water, heartbeats, winds, saliva. Stay still. Stillness doesn't make rivers. I obeyed in a way that hurt. My diaphragm turned to stone. My heart tried to break a rib. "Where are you, San?" I asked, and the question came out without air, a puff. Close enough to know you didn't understand the first instruction. The call dropped, but left in my ear a feeling of a wet finger running over skin. We stayed still, and it was like this, in almost immobility, that we truly heard where she was. The sound didn't come from the ramp. It came from the ceiling. The dust that the light sliced through changed its dance. Fine particles began to fall like a light drizzle. I looked up. The slab had a long crack, a vein in the concrete, and inside the vein, dark liquid gleamed for a second before disappearing. It wasn't leaking. It was presence, searching for weight. "To the pillar," Claire said. We went to the central pillar, thick with the marks of the mold still visible, planks and nails permanently imprinted in the cement. I pressed my back to the pillar. The concrete was rough, tearing my shirt in 3 spots. The sound in the ceiling moved 2 meters to the left, then 1 meter to the right. Then it stopped, and I knew she had measured. Measured and decided. The first touch wasn't on us. It was on the pillar. An impact that didn't break, only bent a sound from within. The concrete made a noise I had never heard. A mineral groan, an old pain reactivated. The vibration passed into my spine as if the building had touched me. The second touch was on the ground, a meter ahead. The body hit and raised dust that came with the smell of cold water. The dust stuck to the sweat on my face, and I couldn't wipe it off. "Still," I repeated, almost without a voice. "Still, still." She appeared coming out of the darkness like a design flaw. First, the flank, drawing that pale scar I knew better than my own scar on my eyebrow. Then, the curve of the neck, a movement impossibly smooth for a creature of that size. The head came last, as if the rest of the body prepared the space. The eye found us, of course it found us, and the tongue drew the air, and the air drew cold lines on my arm. I smelled what she had touched before: old mud, fish, rust, a note of chlorine that wasn't for cleaning, it was for hiding. "Don't blink," said a voice I hadn't spoken. It was mine, or the building's, or the part of my mind that accepts instruction when language ends. I didn't blink, and then what was inside her moved. Not like before, not a push. It was an attempt. The volume under the skin, larger than it was on the ramp, more defined, moved with intention, the shape of a chest trying to expand, searching for air that didn't exist. I saw the 2 bulges like shoulders marking from within. I saw something sink as if a knee had given way. And then, behind the eye, under the veil, the air bubble spun and disappeared. The snake responded with a wave of muscle that traveled through the entire body, from head to tail, a miniature muscular earthquake. The wall responded with a fine dust falling in a thread. Mike dropped the tube, which hit the ground and rolled a bit. The sound of the tube was an explosion in my ear. The head turned to the tube, the tongue touched the air in the direction of the tube. She leaned in. Claire, with a calm that wasn't of this world, nudged the tube with her foot. A gentle touch that made it roll and stop under a pallet leaning against the pillar. The head followed, but the body didn't. That immense body, which could cover the whole hall, kept apart in each shadow, in each rectangle of light, as if it were both water and its shore. That's when another sound entered. Footsteps. Not ours. Dry footsteps, soles echoing on the concrete of the level above. 3, 4, 5 steps, a stop, 2 steps back. Low voices, the building fragmented. Someone looked through a crack. Someone retreated. The snake raised her head by 2 centimeters, and for the first time she didn't look at us or the tube. She looked up. I understood then what the voice had tried to explain. She goes where you see. It wasn't just the lens. It wasn't just the monitor. It was attention. Those coming from above with curious eyes offered a new mirror. And she climbed through mirrors. No, I said to no one, don't go down. My voice filtered through the concrete must have turned to wind. The footsteps above hesitated. The building breathed. The head tilted more. The tongue touched the high air. The snake slowly turned to the narrow stairs we had climbed minutes earlier. The body began to retract, not in flight, but like a rope coiling for one single definitive pull. Now, Claire said, and the now had no direction. It was a password for simple movement. We went along the side, dragging ourselves close to the pillar, like shadows trying to hitch a ride on shadow. The creature, focused on the noise above, allowed us to cross a diagonal of light. The sun's heat in that strip burned my eyes. The side exit rectangle existed again. 2 more meters. 1 more. The first scream came from above. Short, not dramatic. Human, because it was cut off. The building became an amplifier of fear. The snake's body shot toward the stairs. A soundless explosion, just friction. I saw the start of the action and rejected the rest. I turned my face to the exit. The air outside had the taste of hot metal. We ran. The world warmed by 10 degrees. The light was a knife. The sound a distance that didn't want to return. We got into the van like entering a bone. The doors slammed shut, and the outside noise was cut off but not gone. The engine caught on the second try. The gear shift engaged. The wheels grown dust. The exit from the shopping skeleton was a narrow ramp, with dry plants trying to reclaim. We went down almost sideways, tires spitting stones. Halfway down the ramp, a bang echoed inside. Wood breaking, iron twisting. I didn't look. Claire looked. Her skin changed temperature instantly. Go, she said, and I hadn't stopped. On the street, the full sun seemed to offend any memory of moisture. The asphalt burned. Homestead continued as if nothing happened. A dog lying in the shade of a bus stop raised its head and saw us pass without interest. A woman pushed a stroller, the baby sleeping in a calm that the world doesn't offer, only borrows. I drove with my hands so stiff that the leather of the steering wheel imprinted on my palms. The cell phone vibrated on the dashboard. The same message from an unknown number, now as text. Don't come back. Don't publish today. Then, keep it. Let the world dry out a little. Claire read it over my shoulder. What if it's a trap to silence us? Mike answered for her with an ugly truth. What if it's an instruction to survive? We stopped in a large supermarket parking lot, the kind with light towers that turn night into an aquarium. We stayed in the van, air conditioning on full, as if artificial cold could push away the smell of water that stuck inside my nose. Rojas pulled up 15 minutes later. I don't know how he found us. Maybe the swamp lens, beyond predators, a kind of coincidence. He didn't ask. He opened the door, sat in the back seat and held my shoulder again like at the motel exit. Breathe, he said. Now you can. I breathed, and the breath came with dizziness. I felt tears that weren't from emotion. They were from the body remembering how to be soft. Claire put the phone in her bag and said, "We have redundancy. We have time." Rojas looked at the sky, which at that moment had the color of polished metal. Time is something water knows how to waste. I passed the memory card from the camera to the inner pocket of my jacket. The small weight seemed to shift my axis. I remembered when, the previous morning, I had thought of swallowing the card if I fell into the water. I thought about what carries what swallows. By late afternoon, we returned to Miami on normal people's paths. The highway, the radio with silly music, billboards promising what no one delivers. The world generous in its lies. We returned the airboat to Rojas with a handshake that seemed too big for the occasion. He only said, "If water drips where it shouldn't, you know." I nodded, like someone receiving instructions to bite their own tongue if necessary. In the rented apartment that served as our base, we locked 2 doors, 3 locks, and still slept fully dressed. I woke up 3 times to the sound of nothing. I discovered that nothing has timbres. At 3:18 a.m., the cell phone vibrated. It wasn't a message. It was a video call, the same unknown number. I answered with my thumb heavy. The screen showed what the front camera could, my exhausted face, the reflection of the ceiling, and above a tiny red dot, which took me a second to understand. The laser, projected on the ceiling behind me. I turned slowly. Nothing. No emitter. No point. I went back to the screen. The point still stared at me, inside my reflection. The call dropped. I didn't sleep again. I waited for the sun with the patience of someone who has been underwater too long. In the morning, we went to a bank vault, the kind that's underground and promises silence. The manager took us down corridors with thick carpet that muffled footsteps. "Safe, dry," he said. I stored 2 hard drives, 1 card, a paper with passwords written like cousin names. When I closed the compartment, I felt a relief that wasn't relief, just postponement. Before leaving, in a corner of the vault wall near the floor, I saw 2 thin parallel lines scratched into the plaster. A tiny S, shy, almost a child's doodle. I ran my finger over it slowly. It was fresh. The manager asked if everything was okay. I smiled with my teeth and said yes. Outside, the noise of buses and air-conditioned buildings spitting hot air made the world seem solid. Claire turned to me. "Do we publish?" I looked at the summer sky, which promised a storm but also promised it wouldn't come. "We keep it," I said. "We keep it and let the city dry from the inside." That night, at home, I brushed my teeth, listening to the water running. I turned off the tap, and the sound ran for another second. I stopped. The second turned into 2. I opened the cupboard under the sink, just out of superstition. Pipes, cleaning products, nothing. I closed it, went to the bedroom. The air was still. I pressed my ear to the mattress without reason. On the other side of the foam, deep inside, I heard a sound so low that I may be inventing it. Plop, plop, plop. Drops. 3. A pause. 3 again. I stood up slowly. I grabbed the camera. I didn't turn it on. I lay down without sleeping. The ceiling became a quiet lake that refused to reflect what it didn't want. On the edge of sleep, the image came by itself. The eye, and inside it, behind the veil, a bubble of air that rises slowly. The bubble almost reaches the surface and, before bursting, darkens, like a red dot swallowed.